Hey, just your neighborhood weirdo. Since I'm on this with the history of propaganda, again last night, and then talking about it further with psychopathy and autism and how they're different and how that can change how your perception is, along with other mental conditions, because propaganda will hijack the brain and change chemistry because of the raised levels of dopamine, serotonin, and cortisol. Again, by amateur assumption. Well, lowered serotonin, very low serotonin, because when you have low serotonin, that's responsible for depression, as far as I can remember. And so I'm thinking about, obviously I've experienced burnout more than once, and I've experienced, I experienced seasonal depression. It's been an issue for almost my entire life. And obviously, you can see, through my videos and whatnot, that I'm doing a little bit better job of dealing with that. But COVID was really an opportunity for the rest of the public to feel like people that are like me, that are a lot more sensitive to the environment at large and to the culture at large, with anxiety, and I'm not going to say that the feeling is more intense, but it definitely is dominant, and the feeling sense. So that's another real difference between autistic people and those who have psychopathy. Now, psychopaths do experience a range of emotions, but it's very limited in comparison because of the underdeveloped part of their brain. So again, not their fault. And as I've said before, psychopathy or psychosis can be induced by brain injuries or burnout by the synapses from those four. There's four. Then it's all the hormones, and there's a lot of different hormones that influence mood stability and communication in the nervous system. And so, like, as I was just saying, so COVID was really a good opportunity for people to reassess their lives, and but it also led to a lot more drug addiction and dependency. And I learned when I was in Kelowna how close nurses are to ketamine, and that's an issue in the medical community. They don't really talk about it. It's like an opioid epidemic, because the thing is that ketamine at certain doses is psychedelic, right? And there's research out there that states that ketamine is a good way to treat clinical depression. But if it's unsupervised and it's not dosed correctly, then it becomes extremely addictive. And I've witnessed that firsthand. And I'm not going to treat those people differently, because you don't treat a drug addict differently than a normal person. They don't deserve that. They've been through enough trauma already. And the same thing that goes, so with the opioid epidemic and veterans, or any other person that has experienced some sort of workplace injury or chronic injuries. So you had Oxycontin, and then it's slipping my mind right now. Fentanyl, that's it, and then carfentanil. Those are the three ones. And historically, China, I'm not going to blame it on China, but China in the opium wars, let's see, we'll look this up. So the opium wars were fought from 1839 to 1842, and was triggered by the Chinese government's campaign to enforce its prohibition against opium trafficking by British merchants. So that's something to look into. It's very important because propaganda, drugs, and culture are very much interlinked with each other. They're correlated because the availability of these things, and then of course bellicosity, or like tendency towards violence, or history of violence even, is predictors. So okay, so let's go to the first result that I got off of Google as of right now. Was published in March 15th, 2021. It's from the American Journal of Medicine. And so, yeah, so then this was a trend, right? Like the pandemic has, this is the second paragraph, the pandemic has brought a slew of articles on burnout. It seems that everyone has burnout, undergraduates because they're restricted socially, medical students who are over-zoomed. So, you know, when they say who are over-zoomed, means being stimulated by kiddie meth, which is Adderall or Ritalin. Okay. Residents who are now called upon to cover extra shifts or work in areas of the hospital in which they are uncomfortable, and attending physicians unprepared to handle the human devastation. Hospital administrators are burned out trying to procure personal protective equipment and maintain staffing as staff become ill or must restrict their hours with schools closed and their children learning online at home. So again, this relates to the dirty dozen, you know, the human factors. And I'm not very well aware of how well that's communicated in other professional communities, but it needs to happen. So Baker's Dirty Dozen, which the 13th principle, which includes empathy, it's just because that's not included. Okay, so burnout is not considered. This is, again, I'm going to highlight this for all of you so you can go and look at it yourself, because then I can relate it to PTSD. And how that's another feedback loop. Burnout is not considered a disease state. Instead, it is listed in the International Classification of Diseases and Related Health Problems, 11th edition, as a syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. Burnout is characterized in 3 dimensions: feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, or feelings of negativism. I don't know why they use that. They just say negativity, or cynicism related to one's job, and a sense of ineffectiveness and a lack of accomplishment. These 3 dimensions can be formally evaluated and followed using the Maslach, M-A-S-L-A-C-H, burnout inventory. I'm going to skip that one because that's the burnout triad is easily recognized. So it's saddled with increased responsibility, often lacking self-confidence, who are working long hours and feel unaccomplished, can become very cynical. Again, well, there's reasons for this, right? It's all chemically based. Especially if you don't have enough sleep and you can't, your body's not allowed the time to come down from the cortisol and dissipate it, or have, you know, some way of dealing with that heightened state of awareness that comes with, you know, the adrenals. Excuse me. I'm just reading this live, so this was written by Barbara L. Schuster, doctor. Thank you. Okay, so unlike burnout, PTSD is recognized in the DSM 5th edition. The triggers to PTSD is exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violation. The exposure must result from one or more scenarios. The person must, as is the following. The person must directly experience the traumatic event, personally witness the traumatic event, learn that the traumatic event occurred to a close family member or a close friend, or experience firsthand repeated or extreme exposure to adverse details of the trauma. I don't disagree with her, I just have to itch my nose. Behavioral symptoms are important to the diagnosis and include re-experiencing the traumatic event, such as recurrent dreams or flashbacks, avoidance, avoidance described as distress of memories, thoughts, or reminders of the event, negative moods or cognitions, and arousal that includes aggressive, reckless, or self-destructive behavior, sleep disorders, and hypervigilance. Okay, so what does she mean by hypervigilance? So hypervigilance is the elevated state of constantly assessing potential threats and threats around you. I've been there. You know, it's like it's high anxiety. There's some paranoia involved in it. Definitely some paranoia involved in it. And so like it's why and how burnout and PTSD are very similar to each other. And I have a stress tick now. From just being in the aircraft industry and having to be a contractor, and I just got to find a better way to deal with the anger, and thanks to the training from cadets, it being very similar to that of the military and being so close to the military. I've been able to manage stress a lot better than other people, but that doesn't mean I'm invincible. And that doesn't mean that military members or first responders or doctors or anyone in service is immune to these things either. But everybody manages stress very differently from each other. And that's where, the maladaptive coping mechanisms of drugs come into play. And then that gets you into a secondary feedback loop. And it's, okay, so one of the three most easily accessible substances right now in the market are nicotine, marijuana, caffeine, make it 4, and alcohol, right? So when you mix an upper with a downer, that puts you in dissociative states. So when you have a nicotine and a coffee, that's called a tradesman's breakfast, a coffee and a cigarette. That's a dissociative. And then you also have, alcohol and marijuana, especially if it's a sativa, that's another dissociative state, because the sativa acts as an upper, and it works on different endocannabinoid receptors than sativa and indica. Here we go, indica. And specifically, like for the marijuana that's in the market right now in Canada, it is extremely potent. Like, good Lord. Woo! Like having concentrations up to what was it? Very high. Yeah. Like super potent. Marijuana is a psychoactive, so in higher doses, it's very much like mushrooms. Excuse me, and you can learn that by say like tripreports.com. Let's see. Not trip reports. Okay, so yeah, that's off of Reddit where they have trip reports. There was a website, I don't remember the name of it right now. Slips my mind that was a predecessor to that I used to frequent and read a lot in my younger years. So going further on this, so it's a real problem, say if you're a service member, right? And you're in this heightened state and you're getting shot at or whatever's happening, having to witness someone get killed, or, repetitive stress, heightened states, which causes burnout. And then burnout compounded with PTSD is really, really terrible. I wouldn't wish that upon anyone. That, or in the military, there was a history, and I can't see if it still exists or not, but it's well documented, sexual assault or abuses of power, and I know they're trying to do their best to change that. Okay. So this is where it comes into suicide, and I learned this is about the motivations in high school with sociology, and what she's saying here is as follows: When people with burnout or PTSD are tested, the outcomes on the Maslach scale may overlap. Suicide is a concern in both groups. Burnout is felt not to be a direct cause of suicide, but significantly chronic burnout may lead to clinical depression. Yes, exactly, as I was just saying. So thank you. Not confirmation bias, but just it's good to hear it from someone else. Studies suggest that depression is highly comorbid with PTSD and a risk factor for death from a suicide. Thus, depression may be a confounder, mediator, or modifier of the association. Studies of veterans and active duty military have led to conflicting outcomes of the relationship of PTSD with increase in suicides. Now, the thing that I remember about PTSD is that, okay, so the military trains people to kill. Let's not dance around that. And they try to prepare people as best they can, because, the military is there for the last line of defense when diplomacy fails. And when other people around the world want to assault our culture or our people, that's why we fight wars, is because there's no other option except violence, unfortunately. And whenever, as I said, every other option fails, they're there. And it's not going to war is not something that you want to do. Killing someone is not what you want to do, especially, okay, so what's the statistic? Was it 70% of the soldiers don't actually aim at people? Okay, on killing. The book is based on SLA Marshall's theory that the majority of soldiers in war do not even fire the weapons due to innate resistance to killing. So this is written by Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. It was published in 1996. Okay, so did a study, and this is from Wikipedia, so it's a good starting point, on the firing rates of soldiers in Second World War. He found that the ratio of rounds fired versus hits was low. He also noted that the majority of soldiers were not aiming to hit their targets. So, people that grow up peacefully don't want and don't have the desire to kill, because they're not psychopaths. Like, psychopaths generally will see other people as objects to be manipulated, and this is where diagnoses can get into a lot of trouble because of the fact that depression and bipolar or dissociative personality things, there's terminology for it. I'm an amateur. Yeah, and so that the PTSD comes from, as I said here, it's cited here, the classic debate of correlation versus causation. Many believe that the other factors having been influencing PTSD, such as decompression time after conflicts and a lack of moral sovereignty in engagements. So they've had to come to terms with the fact that they had killed someone, and or they were involved in a conflict that was not morally just. So morals are subjective and ethics are objective, as far as I can remember with the philosophy. Morals is more personal, and then ethics is more a rigor or a rubric of evaluation. And from personal experience, I've talked more than a few people out of, or just been there for them in these moments of suicidal thoughts, because it takes a very compassionate person to deal with these issues, because it's extremely vulnerable. right? To tell someone these things, and generally, okay, so victims of sexual assault will hold on to their problems or hold on to it, their experiences for years, or witnessing something along those lines. Like, it's just so traumatic. It's like, burned into their memory, into the synapses themselves, and so the brain has to deal and circumvent and go around with different circuitry, different firing of the neurons. Because they're shaped like spiders, right? And impulses between the ends, and like stuff like that. Yeah. And where am I going to go with this? And so so I'm going to talk about, say, like the war on terror and how that influenced an entire generation. Okay, so again, we're going back to the history of propaganda, collective trauma, right? Everyone. I remember being in the library when the planes hit the Twin Towers, and so it's just completely. I remember the entire scenario being in just the TV being rolled in. We're watching it happen right there, just right then and there, as it was happening. And so, like, this is where it's very easy to be subjected to it because of the repetition, and because of the campaign put together by the U.S. government. This war drumming that was happening. And, it was very tragic. Okay, yeah, of course, you want to have some retaliation. You want to go and get the guy. But, motivations being motivations. Very different. The same thing can happen. And so collective trauma, this is where I say it correlates into the hope and change, and then the disappointment, and then the anger and the cynicism that follows after that. Betrayal, and then also with the financial crisis, and basically a betrayal of an entire generation through finances, and then you have collective trauma after collective trauma, which puts people into a general state of anxiety, depression, and burnout, right? And burnout, it can be very much the same as psychosis or psychopathy, because the brain is not responding in the way that it should. And this is what I've learned. So we'll continue on with this, because I'll make this a second part to the other one with the psychopathy and autism. And I'm not going to put it all into one video, because I want you to watch them, and I want you to research, because the truth is up there. Right? Like a meteor shower. I gotta go walk the dog now.